Thank you, everybody. You've been a phenomenal participatory audience today. My name is Sara Silacci. I am the principal and managing partner for Margin for Mission. And I am here to lead a very esteemed panel to try to summarize everything that we've learned and discussed today into palatable bites that you can take away coming out of the day. And I really want to thank the 5 people sitting on the stage. I don't think it's been shared yet that this group actually has served as a steering committee for this entire symposium. So this phenomenal agenda, the amazing speakers that we've had today, this was all in coordination with Julian and partnered with Julian, Dr. Goldman, but was really done by this panel. So well done. Okay, so we have about 45 minutes for this. And we're going to try to fit in some Q&A since we had to cut that short earlier today. But I'm going to start. We have 5 questions that I want to ask the panel. And I'm going to start with Tracy. Tracy, thinking about today, you gave a great talk, one of the best talks, I have to say.
Thank you.
About scalability and adoption. And so what do you, after we hear the breakout report outs, what do you see as the most significant clinical and technical challenges in deploying SaAMS at scale? And how can we leverage existing technologies and innovations to address these challenges?
So I think the biggest challenge is that we're installing into a very complex architecture and ecosystem that has been put together over many, many decades, and finding out where it fits so it can, because it's not going to replace the existing infrastructure, but how does it fill in the gaps, and how do we get to that adoption and that education piece, I think is going to be one of the bigger challenges to do it. And I think the key is going to be coming down to the fact that, it's been clear from the speakers today and elsewhere that how we're going to pay for this to be able to do this and move this forward. I think the other thing we have to keep in mind is there's steps along the way, and we have to continue to heed those steps and hit those milestones as we go along the way to continue to provide value at every level. And I think the key thing that's going to come across, which has been very different than, at least from my experience of doing this, the ROI on this is not from a single instance. It's by the combination of the instances that occur. So you could implement, a closed loop anesthesia system, but it's actually going to get paid for from something operationally. And having that bigger systems approach is, I think, the education that's going to have to happen to understand that this isn't a 1-for-1. If I install X, I get Y. It's if I install X, I get 3 or 4 other things that are actually going to make it so it's actually economical and be able to be paid for.
And the change management, it sounds like.
And the change management on that. But, I think it comes down to the fact is that, through my entire career, when I was a clinical engineer, I actually never had a positive ROI on any technology. And so it was always like, what's going to bleed the least amount to get it? And I think having that mindset of, no, we have to look at this from that system standpoint is actually going to allow us to actually change that mindset that this stuff can start to pay for itself. And that will shorten the development life cycle. It will accelerate innovation and open things up instead of, that mindset of we can't add anymore because it's just going to cost more money. Like, we have to be able to demonstrate that piece.
Excellent. Does any other panel member want to add to that?
I would say, not being a very experienced clinical engineer and having to live in the real world, because I don't live in the real world, I think going to need small demonstration projects to demonstrate the viability of this, because the big system is broken, and the big system isn't going to be replaced because there isn't one entity that can replace it. Right. So it's going to have to be the marketplace that's going to push the new product in, the new infrastructure, the new system, and the other people, it's going to be by demand, because the new system is going to be so much better, so much more cost effective and easier to manage and navigate.
And who do you see as that stakeholder? Is that provider system?
Where's Colonel Pamplin? There he is. He's got control of the system, of his system.
All right. Between Ram and Colonel Pamplin, we've got some marching orders to deliver on. Go ahead, Matt.
So something that Tracy said reminded me of I thought a really powerful slide in her talk, which was breaking down the benefits, the value of a system approach by stakeholder. So patients, clinicians, system administrators or hospital administration or health system administration. Was it regulators? Oh no, manufacturers of devices and regulators.
Yeah.
There's benefits to each of those. And I think that a key thing that the collaborative needs to focus on is quantifying those and demonstrating them and publishing them so that it is not conceptual, but that it is borne out in projects. And as we think about prioritizing projects, that will give us the basis for the ROI and the prioritization of those. And again, some projects may be more focused on the administration benefit or the clinical benefit or the regulatory path benefit, but there's got to be something there, and it's got to be, the next slide that we see of that, we want citations or case studies next to those to show how it works out.
Well, just Sandy, I want to ask you a question. Coming out of the breakout sessions, let's really focus on the clinical and the technical aspects, because those are probably, maybe all of the stakeholders, super important. But clinical and technical, what are the key clinical outcomes and technical advancements that are necessary to ensure the success of the SaAMS collaborative community? And how can we develop the best clinical practices and standards to achieve these outcomes? Yeah.
Easy.
Such a small question. I think we're going to have to take it piece by piece. I think what Matt's response is the right one, that we're going to have to identify in each of the stakeholder areas, what is the value proposition for that stakeholder?
Yeah.
And I don't know what the answer is, which is why the SaAMS community is so needed and necessary, because each one is going to have to be explored and figure out what is the experiment to be performed, who's going to pay for it, and what is the evidence that's going to be convincing.
So Loretta, just if you could build on this, and maybe I'll refine the question a little bit more. How do you think we can foster the effective collaboration and communication amongst all these stakeholders, particularly the technical and the clinical teams, and and then engineers, researchers, government regulators, etc., industry?
Well, I would say that we'll either do it voluntarily as a group and come to realize that together we can work much more effectively and deliver better access to care, quality of care, repeatability, reliability, and save people from burnout. We'll either do that voluntarily, or we'll be voluntold to do it by a federal edict of some sort, because we cannot continue to not have decision support, semi-autonomous or autonomous care, and continue on the glide path that we're on. The other industries, aviation, automotive, have all adopted autonomy, and we look honestly foolish as a medical stakeholders by continuing on the path that we're on, because we're trying to protect our 2 square feet of turf. If telecommunication can get together and agree on USB, my God, we should be able to get together and agree on some framework with which we can all still innovate, have proprietary solutions, but yet operate intelligently. The other thing I'm concerned about is clinician buy-in. I was there at the beginning of telemedicine and telehealth, and oh my God, it's like, you're going to kill somebody. What do you mean you can't you're taking care of a patient over the phone or over the internet? Clinicians who are intelligent and they just don't want to change. So the change management piece, even though it makes logical sense, even though you have studies and publications that show it's safe and it's effective, that clinical buy-in and getting the change management of people that think only they can do it the way that it's been done properly. Whereas if I'm a nurse on my 12th hour of my third 12-hour shift in 4 days in the ICU, I know that I'm not as sharp as I was 3 days ago when I started. So I fully admit that I do not have the consistency, the capability, and the skill level to deliver that kind of care. And there's a myth that in-person is much more preferable to autonomous. And we know from aviation that that's not true. So,
So you've brought up other industries a few times, and I'd love to dive into that a little bit more. What are some of the learnings that we can take from the other industries about how they've really driven transformation?
so some have done it voluntarily. Telecommunications, for example, some have done it by federal edict. The FAA investigates all of the aviation accidents, and then they do remediation, and then they disseminate that so everybody can learn from it. So that's a great model, but it took a federal agency to corral everybody, and I don't know that
If
that's
only
what we
knew a
want. in
few
medical.
people from federal agencies here
Pardon me?
today. If only we knew a few people from federal agencies here
Yeah.
today.
But I don't know anyone who wants to take on that mantle or who has taken on that mantle. We don't have that agency in medical currently.
Well, so
We regulate
Yeah.
medical device manufacturers. We don't regulate the practice of medicine.
Yes.
We don't regulate the hospitals. We don't regulate that system.
And the use of their technologies in general. The use of it, you regulate the technologies, but not the use of the technologies. So there's a gap in our industry, and hopefully this group can fill that gap voluntarily.
And we know that. I mean, Julian has proposed, and we've looked at cross-border, if you will, investigation teams, because when things go bad, I mean, FDA can come in and say, what happened to your medical device? But if it's an IT system or the hospital or medical practice, that's outside the scope. And so we don't have that larger system perspective.
Yeah. Jacob doesn't suffice.
Hmm.
No, you were going to say something.
So I should have prefaced this by saying that the disclaimer, my views do not represent the Department of Defense, the Army, TATRC, any of this. But in a former life, I worked for a regulatory agency, FCC, right? And there was the sort of interoperability that FCC deals with is often around spectrum and agreement on spectrum rules and power and things like that. And there was a really good example of it where acting chairwoman, actually at the time, Mignon Clyburn, brought together key stakeholders and basically said, figure it out. Because you don't want us to figure it out. The following chairman, Wheeler, wrote a book on how to regulate in these complex times. And he had this saying, if you will, we won't. If you don't, we shall.
Yeah.
So sort yourselves out, people, right? And to really the big picture here is we're going to see a choice in industry of those who want to collaborate and work as part of a system for lots of really good reasons, and those who do not, probably for their own also good reasons, right? But it's just different. And market opportunities will present themselves, I believe, to those who do of the kinds that are here, and the value will be created, especially in the medium and long term. In the short term, people are going to want to cling to their, the other ways. It's very complex, as Sandy said, to try to regulate all the pieces of this to force people to do it, right? But everybody has their own little piece, and it will be considerably more difficult to bring products to market to solve all of these problems that can be done collectively.
There were other things that happened in telecom, like natural disasters. And things were supposed to work and didn't.
Correct.
And it became blatantly obvious that whatever quote interoperability they thought they had, they did not.
Yeah.
Well, we had the pandemic
unnatural
as a great
disasters.
forcing function in some ways, right? But you've all been part of
9/11 and FirstNet.
There you go. And so you've all been part of collaborations that have been successful and not successful. What are some of the best practices or the lessons learned so that we can guide the collaborative community towards a successful path? So some do's and don'ts as we look to do these multi-stakeholder collaborations. So I'll start by saying it's going to take really thoughtful cadence at the outset, bringing together the right working groups, the right subject matter experts, cross-populating, getting into a routine around tackling different specific issues. And that's hard to do. We've built great momentum today. How do we keep that going? What are the do's and don'ts?
It's got to be a coalition of the willing and brave.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's got to be a few brave manufacturers stepping up to the plate and say, here's a small problem which we think we can solve.
Dr. Datta, you've been quiet.
Well, you had a question.
I do, but I have this one now.
I think Sandy just gave me the cue that I would have answered. We need, and I'm giving.
Well, then let me read the question. You want me to
Okay.
read it?
Please
Okay,
do,
I'm
yeah.
going to read the question. How can we secure sustainable funding and resources to support the clinical and technical initiatives of the collaborative community while ensuring alignment and regulatory standards and guidelines and overcoming potential barriers to success?
Thank you, Sarah. So I'll give you the benefit of my little experience from creating a number of consortiums, 6 consortiums. The people, technical people who come to meetings don't generally reach the strategy of the C-suite. Hence, the C-suite, which controls the money, is not sufficiently educated about the value proposition that a good team like this or a particular topic in a consortium could get to them. So I think what we need is an extraordinarily focused group of people using Julian as the platform. Julian is not an MD, not SaAMS. Julian is a platform. And the platform has 2 sides. On one side are the buyers, Colonel Pamplin, the military, the VA, the MGHs, the UCSF, SF General, the buyers. On the other side are the big manufacturers who possess the amount of wealth necessary to jumpstart something. And if we can get Julian as the platform to bring these 2 groups together in very specific curated conversations, and then Julian unleashes his wealth of experience on them, why it is important. It will take quite a few hard knocks, but if we get a critical mass of these people on either side buying into the idea, already on the Mass General, SF General side, we have a lot of people, but on the other side, the corporate side, if we could get half a dozen or 10 CEOs, not head of a department of technology, and with all due respect to all of you, because I am a nano dust in this scheme of things, so I know how little I am. But if you get those CEOs and the stakeholders on the buyer side together with Julian as the central attraction, that will take some time, but if we get 4 or 5 major supporters from both sides, it's a done deal. The rest will be driven like AI. Everybody is doing it because of fear of missing out. There's no value in AI.
Well,
Anyway, I'm going to leave that dangling because I know there's good. But
let's debate the value of AI. That should liven this up.
Search engine optimization, that's really the only value.
the only optimization that search engines can do is to make certain that all the Seinfeld characters are like Victorian characters. That's the value of AI.
So something to build off of that point, when we, slide 3 of yesterday, when we were having our steering committee meeting, the comment that I made was the purpose of this and the value of this might make a lot of sense to the folks in the room who have largely bought into the importance of SaAMS and the importance of patient safety and the importance of all of these things. But our bosses at this level need to have the perspective that their participation, our participation as institutions and manufacturers and other entities is vital to their success. They need to be the ones pushing rather than
You need to
us
give the
trying to
mandate
explain it.
while you achieve the mission.
Yeah, and that could be. The negative of it is that our competitors are all here, so you need to be there, not to scuttle it, but
To support it.
to support it.
So I'll give you 2 examples. One example Julian knows, one example Julian doesn't know. 1999, at MIT, we created the Auto ID Center. We standardized RFID, the electronic product code, today is from MIT Auto ID Lab. How did we do it? We had 6 industries, one by one. Not 6 doesn't happen at the same time. 21 meetings took to get 6 people to put in $11 million. Because MIT's IDC, indirect cost, is 54.6%. So 11 million minus 54.6%. That started the Auto ID Lab, 6 after 21 meetings. What Julian knows is IIC, the Industrial Internet Corporation, 5 major companies, each $500,000 was put down on the table before IIC started. I was the founding senior vice president, and I have been working with those 5 companies. And Julian knows this because that's how we met in 2013. So you need some foothold, and the foothold in this case is dependent on credibility. In every case, it's dependent on credibility. Julian has phenomenal credibility. How to monetize the credibility? Monetization of the credibility is not in the hands of technical people, it's in the pockets of the CEO and the strategic group. So you need direct interaction with the executives in the C-suite with you, not in this room, in Cafe Romano, maybe in Venice,
So
and he will get that.
sorry to interrupt. I want to make sure time for Q&A, but we'll say, just hearing today, it's not the funding alone, right? It's that top down, right? But it's also the willingness, as Matt was saying, to share information amongst competitors. And the information that Hagit shared earlier today from Neon Coden and what they're willing to do to help support the community
Good job.
bravo. So let there be more examples like this one. So unless there are any final thoughts,
They're not mutually exclusive.
they're not. No,
Yeah.
we need them both.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What Neon Code did was phenomenal. But we need in parallel to do one side with the corporate people who control the money, and on the other side, the technical people who will share the information. One without the other, your pants will fall down.
And on that note, let's open it up to Q&A. Yes.
Over here and then there.
It's like Donahue. Remember Donahue? Am I dating myself? Okay.
So related to what you were just talking about, sitting here, and I also think about all the cyber meetings we had on devices. Other than Mass General, where are all the other hospital chains and capability? They're the people who are going to be the end users. I'm not that tied into this community, but I've gone to all these meetings and I've never seen all of the other providers. Where are they?
Back home managing major incidents. No.
The ones from Ascension are busy.
Why aren't they involved? Where's Mercy or where's hospital chain? Why aren't they involved in these discussions?
So one thing, I mean, and again, Julian is many places, but one of the places that he is participating in the Health Sector Coordinating Council and spreading the word about SaAMS, not just as a interoperability thing, but as a cybersecurity thing. The Health Sector Cybersecurity Council is the national public-private entity that does that. I would like to see more CEOs and high-level people, not just CISOs, at that. I have to say that as somebody who worked with small providers, I was at HRSA prior to this, federally qualified health centers. We worked Julian's also part of CISA 405D, really important entity in translating cyber guidelines to consumable pieces, not NISTs, right? One of the key things that we got into priorities was around device connectivity and medical device cybersecurity. So he's working in lots of different ways. Don't tell anybody, right?
But bringing other provider systems into the conversation so that we're generating that grassroots kind of adoption, right? Getting input from multiple provider systems. I think that's what.
I can still remember the second meeting, 2005, that we had. There were a lot of providers there. And they said, what system are you going to provide to me? as opposed to how can I help you develop the system?
Right.
So that's a key takeaway for what sets us up for success. Framing the question, we're not here to provide a service, we're here to get your input on what we can do. Yeah, excellent.
But it also goes back to that one-on-one connection. If you just have a lot of providers, for example, Julian, your friend Larry Jameson, one part, your friend and my advisor, one part, the Chancellor of UC, 9 UCs. So there are ways that it can be done, but it has to be done. All of these people and Julian cannot be in the same room at the same time. They have different interests.
Okay. Colonel Pamplin, I see you have a microphone.
It's dangerous. May I make a comment before a question?
Absolutely.
Clinicians in the room, right? It's also CEOs in the room, right? This comments come up a couple of times, and it's all about the value proposition, I think. So what is it that you deliver to them that makes their life easier or saves them money? And, you know, we haven't really nailed down some of those use cases today. Our focus right now is quality of care. You know, I don't know if that's the value proposition, honestly. I think we are all motivated by it because it's important, but we've been motivated by that for a lot of years, and it's not really turning the dime, right? We're not going after the value proposition of quality because the patients aren't demanding it. I guess, I don't know. There's no cost associated with it. We haven't figured out how to connect those particularly well.
Yeah.
But if you can scale clinical care resources with more technology and less humans, some CEO is saving some money, right? If you can make my time less in the hospital to document patient care or to, you know, so I see 10 more patients in a day with the same amount of effort, you know, and I like it more, there's a value proposition there. The clinicians will demand it. So I just don't know that we've really defined the value proposition quite effectively yet to get those kinds of people in the room. The question I have, it's a softball. So we've talked a lot about collecting various types of data and using that data in a interoperable way to solve kind of problems. How are we going to deal with patient level private data? How does that become part of the system?
That's a softball?
Oh, that's not a softball?
I'll take that one.
All right.
I think it was directed at me anyway, so. So I think this comes down to how you structure this data and how you make it independent. I think one of the key things is that the patient level privacy data is actually a very small set of the data that you have. And this comes down to about how you collect and save that data when you first get it, that it's very easy to pull that data out. I think right now, one of the challenges you have with the current data set is PHI is scattered throughout many sets of unstructured data, unstructured text. It takes a lot of processing to clean it up. But when you start to look at the type of data that we're looking to collect here, it's actually, there's a way to segment it out and have a couple levels of misdirection that you can utilize the data and still maintain privacy. So
Many health systems aren't capturing device data.
correct. And that's, as I said in my talk, it's the largest source. It is the sole source. It is the initial source of all data.
Yeah.
So any data that you're collecting elsewhere is a secondary source. So you had to add additional information to it. If you're collecting it from the source, you have the richest data set that's available. That's to be really, because it's late. It's like science data collection 101. So
I wish Tom McCoy was here. We'll get him on that working group.
And to your question about the business case, that has been asked several times over the last 2-3 decades. And I know West Wireless and a bunch of people have tried to solve that and actually published articles on it, on how much money could, quote, be saved. Yeah, I mean, the cost of non-quality, right? I don't know that we have a good answer for you yet, or an answer that everybody believes. And maybe that can be one of the first projects in the SaAMS community, is to revisit that.
I think one of to Colonel Pamplin's point, to one of the presentations earlier too, we're coming into a real time of provider shortage.
Yeah.
And we need to do something radically different to maintain a quality of care and a clinician satisfaction desire to keep staying in this business. That might be the inflection point that really does things, because we're willing to pay, traveling clinicians and other people lots and lots of money. And we need to think about this in terms of technological solutions that do it better, faster, with fewer people doing better work.
I think Julian's talk should start with Thomas's talk. That's the problem. SaAMS is the solution.
Oh, speak of the devil.
There we go. So I wanted to comment on a few things specifically. The notion of kind of the purview of federal agencies like the FDA, I think today exemplified the national gap that we have. So if a manufacturer has a device that fails to perform and causes an injury or could have, that's within the purview of the FDA as a regulatory agency. If a organization lacks a technology, such as the ability to stop an infusion while a patient is having a negative reaction, an adverse reaction to an infusion of an antibiotic or blood transfusion, whatever, the absence of a technology, the absence of a capability is not captured or documented. So the impact isn't known. In contrast, the FAA for years has captured near misses, concerns by a pilot that on approach there's a reflection that could have caused a problem. Right? That the possible anything that could have caused the problem is part of the mandate for capturing, and they have systems that could then inform the development of safer environments. And we don't do that in healthcare. So that's been a longstanding problem. The absence of capturing it. And that was part of the vision of the clinical scenario repository that we developed to allow for the voice of the customers, whoever they are. We need a system like that nationally for patients and their families and providers to contribute their good ideas for improving the quality of healthcare, especially around closing technology gaps. So
Yes.
that's one point I think that we touched on, but the central point is there's no one with that responsibility today.
Do you have a question, Dr. Goldman?
Yeah. My question is, how do we, well, first of all, I wanted to comment on the statement. And
I
my
heard.
question is there a pathway to that kind of reporting? How could we possibly do that in this country?
That's also not a softball.
I think that the correct answer is some sort of a safe harbor for reporting those things. We've tried it with patient safety organizations. We've tried it with, with cybersecurity with a similar structure, and it just hasn't been the motivator that we thought it would. Something that's inherent to the ICE standard is the black box recorder, and that's been key to NTSB and aviation investigations. And again, maybe a project or something that we could look at was collecting black box data of good outcomes and not so good outcomes and seeing what the difference is. Sometimes it's going to be actions that are the difference. Sometimes it's going to be omissions that are the difference, and really showing the value, not of, this isn't for the purpose of blaming individuals, but to show that approach bears out in healthcare as well as aviation and other industries.
So omission of an event must be an event for the event to be captured.
Correct.
It's a semantically challenged idea. But if it can be done, then you replicate FAA. But how do you know when an omission of an event has happened so that the system can capture it without the human in the loop?
Any other questions? Oh, we got one here.
I mean, I'll settle for human capturing the event at the moment.
Exactly, not human with no human.
Thank you. This might be a naive question, so forgive me, but one component that I have not heard of the healthcare ecosystem that I have not heard be mentioned in this couple of days is the healthcare insurance and reimbursement code. And so often medical device innovation stops at the R&D group on a corporate because there is
code.
not the correct reimbursement code that makes that solution commercially viable. So I'm wondering if there might be a reimbursement code for the single component, but once we connect them in an interoperable system, what is the impact that that had on the reimbursement codes? And is that a term of the equation that needs to be taken into consideration to drive adaptation?
Excellent question.
I mean, I'll, as the least qualified to probably address that, I'll say it anyway. I mean, a number of years, we had the construct of talking to the middlemen and the insurance companies because they're the ones that can save the most money. And, you know, if you talk about reduction of integration costs and frankly, the ability to bill for all the different procedures that are happening that they miss, it almost seems like that's straightforward that the insurance companies would want to support such a system. But are there any insurance companies here that, and it's not that they don't know that this is going on.
Including them in the innovation process. So we're building something that ultimately someone's going to pay for. I think Colonel Pamplin said this earlier, like, how do we establish a value prop? And if there's no mandate, then we need a buyer.
Well,
we need someone to pay for it.
In the best of all worlds, if you want to take $1 trillion out of a healthcare system, somebody's going to not want you to do that.
It's controversial.
Right.
There's winners and there's losers in this change, in massive fundamental change. And I harken back to telehealth. The agencies that are self-funded or like the Department of Defense, the VA health system, they get one chunk of money and they got to use their money most efficiently. So they adopted telehealth and didn't worry about the billing. However, once we got into telehealth in the civilian sector, we got codes for that so that it could be used and we could be paid, and providers and healthcare institutions could be paid. But that is down the road in terms of momentum and implementation. But there are plenty of healthcare organizations that are self-funded that it makes sense and saves money so they can implement it. The Kaisers of the world, HMOs, don't need codes per se. They just do it because it saves them money, or it's a more efficient way to deliver repeatable, reliable, consistent, accessible healthcare to more people.
One more quick comment. In the early days, I remember Kaiser was building a hospital system in California. I think they were building 3 hospitals or 4 hospitals, if I remember correctly. And one of their hospitals was going to be the test bed for interoperability. And then the cost of construction doubled, something like that. And so all the money, it was like $100 million they were going to pour into seeing if this construct would actually work, went out the window and wasn't revisited.
Well, I'm sure everyone's reading about Steward Healthcare, all the quality and safety issues. Think of the economic research that could come from that, justifying.
Can I remind everybody to read a paper, please?
Yes.
Paper is by Goldman Sachs, and the paper's topic is, should we actually invest in biotech pharmaceuticals that cures disease? Is curing a disease good for business?
Yikes, Goldman.
It is a paper.
All right,
Google
it's
it,
a paper.
read it. That's what the industry thinks. The
If I had a
insurance
keyboard, I'd put it
industry
on.
is not about saving money. The insurance industry is about optimizing shareholder value. So if they don't have to do something, they can take that money out of the system and give it to their shareholders. So Goldman Sachs, the idea that pharmaceuticals and biotech companies should not be invested in if there is a cure.
I think they just wanted clicks with that title. What do you?
They want to continue. It's
I
like,
know.
it's like therapy. Sorry,
I know.
no jokes.
His comments don't reflect the DOD or the Army or TATRC either.
Yes, we have.
I was curious what you guys thought about the way that autonomy is being practiced in other industries, similar to driving and drones, et cetera. They don't assume that they're going to do that connect all the manufacturers. They assume road signs aren't going to change, roads aren't going to change, people are still going to come across the street. And so we moved from this idea that we'd control our environment and get everybody to work together to introducing AI, vision, audio, et cetera. So what what, if anything, makes sense to say, well, we're not going to get all these manufacturers to play well together, but we can still introduce an autonomy system outside that can watch monitors, that can listen to what is going on in operating rooms, et cetera. What about that idea, similar to the way folks are doing it in other autonomy areas where they can't control the environment?
Well, the other, and I looked into this in terms of why reinvent the autonomy wheel in medicine if we've done it in aviation and space and nuclear submarines that have autonomous systems to run themselves. So the way they start out is they have a reference framework, a technical reference framework that everyone agrees to, and then all the vendors that participate in it meet those requirements for that technology, right? So it's a common capability that everyone agrees on technically, and then their particular contribution external will meet that so that the systems are interoperable. So many vendors can play, many contractors can play, but the reference framework establishes the playing field, the guidelines, the boundaries of what to use and what not to use, the standards, like ICE and nomenclature, standard outputs coming out of machines in common terms. And so that's the way that I would envision, or that has been successful in other industries and autonomy. Is that the way this group should proceed? Maybe. Your notion of doing my AI and my autonomy out here and then somehow penetrating it and disseminating it. It's not been done in the other autonomy platforms, so.
That's how they do it. Like self-driving vehicles assume they have no control over their environment, but they still do self-driving.
But their environment is fixed and not changing.
Yes.
Well, that's not completely true. I mean, well, but the roads are there and the signs are there. And there's this construct called streetlights that sometimes work and sometimes
It depends
don't.
if you use Waze or Apple
The
Maps.
variability in the human body is a little bit more.
Great. I know we
It's
have
an
we have
interesting
time for
comment.
one last question. Oh, sorry. Go.
I would just start asking that it's not just autonomy, they have situational awareness as well. I have a Tesla, if you let it go, it will stop. So it's not just autonomy.
Jeremy said he drove here from Virginia or Maryland and he didn't stop at all on autonomous.
Oh, man, I made it 43 minutes and 30 seconds maintaining like order. I think it was pretty good. All right, Grace. Close us out, Grace. Take us home.
Oh, lots of pressure here. I'm actually trying to still formulate my thoughts, but I guess I cover a lot of different worlds at the NIH, and my patient safety portfolio before was all on medical simulators and workflow simulation, and trying to emulate the human in the loop and increase performance. And many of you overlap with me from TATRC and all those areas. And I'm just wondering if there's any convergence with that group of folks who are interested in reducing medical errors and increasing patient safety, and your interest in increasing patient safety. And it might be to go easier on the A part of your SaAMS. I mean, and include human in the loop, because when we're talking about digital twins, we're also thinking we need to start, it might be my phone actually telling me to check in, but it might be that we need to be easy on the A and start with a little human in the loop. And I know the other community, the medical simulation community, is huge, but also have their issues of gaining traction. And I wonder if there's a melding of the minds, and I just wanted to put it out there.
All right. Well, thank you very much, panel. Thank you.
Can we respond to that? We have 6 seconds left.
Go for it.
That's negative 8 seconds
No,
now.
it's negative say. Oh, it's. I think there's a lot of recognition that augmented decision-making is probably obviously is a lot easier than autonomous, and that's the place to start.
Yeah. Well said.